Amorality is definitely rampant in the business world. Taking a moral position will cost you, which is why regulation and enforcement is necessary. When it becomes cheaper to be ethical, then enforcement won't be necessary. Amorality will be widespread when you're competing in a system that's effectively indifferent. Being immoral takes as much effort as being moral. The amoralist just doesn't care one way or the other. They're more often than not simply focused on self-interest and weighing consequences. They are self-interested consequentialists.
You make a great point, Thomas. In a business world driven by competition and profits, morality can indeed become a casualty. When the costs of being ethical outweigh the benefits, it's understandable that businesses might opt for the path of least resistance, even if it's morally questionable. That's why regulations and enforcement are necessary to create a level playing field and incentivize ethical behavior. We should strive for a system where being ethical is not only the right thing to do, but also the most practical and advantageous choice for businesses. This way, morality wouldn't be seen as a burden or a luxury, but rather as an integral part of successful business operations.
Amoralism is a philosophical position that asserts the absence or rejection of moral principles or a moral code. An amoral individual or system does not adhere to conventional notions of right and wrong or does not consider ethical considerations in decision-making. It's important to distinguish amoralism from immoralism. Immoralism typically involves a conspicuous disregard for moral principles and an active engagement in behavior that is considered unethical or wrong by societal or cultural standards. Amoralism, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily imply deliberate wrongdoing. It suggests a lack of concern for moral matters altogether. Amoralism can be found in certain philosophical theories, such as certain forms of moral skepticism, where individuals may argue that there are no objective moral truths or that moral claims are ultimately subjective or relative.
Exactly, Thomas. The distinction between amoralism and immoralism is crucial to understand as they represent two different approaches to ethical decision-making. Amoralism can be seen as a passive stance, where the individual or system simply lacks a moral compass or does not factor ethical considerations into their actions. This could be due to various reasons, such as a lack of exposure to moral education, a disregard for societal norms, or an inability to empathize with others. In contrast, immoralism involves an active disregard for moral principles and a deliberate choice to engage in unethical behavior. This could manifest as a rejection of conventional morality or a calculated decision to pursue self-interest at the expense of others. Both amoralism and immoralism can have significant implications for individuals, organizations, and society as a whole, which is why understanding these concepts is essential for promoting ethical behavior and decision-making.
It's worth noting that discussions around amoralism can be complex and can touch on various philosophical, cultural, or psychological perspectives. Psychological egoism. This is a theory in ethics that asserts that individuals always act in their self-interest, even when it may appear otherwise. According to this view, people are inherently motivated by self-preservation and personal gain, and moral considerations do not play a fundamental role in decision-making. Certain forms of utilitarianism. While utilitarianism is a moral theory that emphasizes maximizing overall well-being, some interpretations might be seen as amoral because they focus solely on the outcomes of actions without consideration for the intrinsic moral value of those actions. Some interpretations of existentialism. Certain existentialist philosophies, especially those associated with Friedrich Nietzsche, suggest that conventional moral categories are artificial constructs and that individuals should forge their own values without being constrained by traditional moral norms. Psychopathy. Psychopathy is a personality disorder characterized by a lack of empathy and moral conscience. Psychopaths may engage in behavior that is considered morally reprehensible without experiencing guilt or remorse. Hypothetical moral dilemmas. In certain moral dilemmas, hypothetical scenarios are constructed to challenge conventional moral intuitions. These scenarios might involve situations where adhering to traditional moral principles leads to undesirable outcomes, causing individuals to question or abandon those principles. Critics of amoralism argue that it undermines the foundations of a just and orderly society. They contend that a lack of adherence to moral principles can lead to chaos, as individuals and groups may pursue their self-interest without regard for the well-being or rights of others. Without a shared moral framework, cooperation and trust among members of a community becomes precarious, potentially eroding the social fabric. Moreover, critics argue that amoralism fails to provide guidance in situations where ethical decisions are crucial, such as in matters of justice, human rights, and societal responsibilities. In the absence of moral considerations, important issues may be reduced to a mere calculus of self-interest, potentially leading to outcomes that are unfair, oppressive, or even harmful.
Indeed, symptoms of amoralism are quite compelling and highlight the potential dangers of a society without a shared moral framework. When individuals and groups prioritize self-interest above all else, it can lead to a race to the bottom where everyone is looking out for themselves at the expense of others. Create a hostile and untrustworthy environment, making it difficult for people to work together and achieve common goals. Moreover, the absence of moral considerations in critical decision-making processes can result in a lack of empathy, fairness, and accountability. This can be especially harmful when dealing with issues that have significant implications for justice and human rights. Without a moral compass, there's a risk that the powerful and privileged will continue to benefit at the expense of groups, perpetuating social inequalities and injustices.
Furthermore, critics maintain that amoralism overlooks the intrinsic value of moral virtues, such as compassion, empathy, and altruism. They argue that these virtues play a crucial role in fostering healthy relationships, promoting social cohesion, and creating a sense of belonging within a community. Without a moral framework, these virtues may be neglected or dismissed, potentially leading to a society that prioritizes self-serving behavior over the well-being and dignity of others. Critics of amoralism thus contend that a rejection of moral principles risks devaluing the very qualities that contribute to the richness and depth of human relationships and the flourishing of societies. I always have to come back to the implications of business with this. If you run a business and you do everything right, but your competitor cheats and lies on his records and is able to price his service lower because of it, that can put you out of business. So you're left with cheat and survive because the other guy's cheating and we're part of the same system, or do the right thing and lose. It's not your fault you can't compete, but it becomes your fault because you have to cheat? No. It comes down to the need for regulation. When the situation is regulated, everybody can do the right thing fairly. But if the processes are not fairly regulated, morally, I don't think it's your fault you have to cheat. You don't control the system, and you'll be forced out unfairly. I'm a moralist, but I understand it's not always the amoralist's fault they have to act in a self-interested manner in order to survive when regulation fails. If you like this kind of philosophical subject matter, help us out by liking the video and subscribing to the channel.